All right, we're here at the first virtual JNUC to talk Jamf Pro integration with ServiceNow. And I have Utpal Takrar here with me from ServiceNow to talk about the first-party integration ServiceNow has brought to market this year. I'm Matt Armstrong, a senior systems engineer from our research team here at Jamf. Utpal, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone, depending on where you are. I'm Utpal Takrar from ServiceNow, as Matt said, and we'll be talking about Jamf and ServiceNow today.
A couple of forward-looking statements from both of us as we'll be talking about some things that are coming soon to our products. If you need, take a screenshot for reference.
Very similar statement from ServiceNow side as well. Safe harbor notice for forward-looking statements, and feel free to read it offline. So again, thank you again for the for joining this session, and thank you, Matt, for setting this up. I'm really excited to present some of the recent work we've been doing with Jamf. Again, my name is Utpal from ServiceNow. I lead various integrations effort for CMDB. My background primarily has been around IT operations management and cloud management. Been with ServiceNow for a number of years. Recently joined this product, started leading that on the CMDB integrations, and we'll talk about the additional things that we are doing in this area. So in today's session, we'll focus on how we integrate Jamf with ServiceNow to bring some actionable inventory and configuration data from end-user devices from the Jamf cloud into ServiceNow CMDB. I'll also share a couple of new concepts we introduced with our Paris release that became generally available on September 16th. So before we dive into the details of the presentation, a brief word on ServiceNow itself. Simply put, we transform old manual ways of working into modern digital workflows. Employees and customers get what they need when they need it, fast, simple, and easy. We are a 100% SaaS-based offering, built on top of a cloud-based platform with a number of services such as IT service management, IT operations management, security operations, IT asset management, built using the same user experience, the same data model on top of the CMDB. We have customers in a number of different industry verticals, with a majority of them the global 2,000 companies. We can call them our customers. CMDB is at the heart of ServiceNow platform. It is also at your organizational heart of your organization's digital foundation. CMDB captures the assets and relationships throughout your enterprise and provides business context by bringing technology, people, and processes together through a common data model and workflows. The data in the CMDB drives the outcome for IT operations, security operations, business processes, cost management, and a plethora of other business problems. Not having a CMDB in an enterprise is like having a building without a foundation. As the complexity of the organization grows, the complexity of the CMDB will also grow, but it's all the more reason to get focused on the CMDB and making sure that the quality of the data is correct there and it's appropriate for your organization. Now, Service Graph is a new concept we announced at our annual conference in May earlier this year. And you'll continue to hear more about the capabilities that we introduce in the future. Service Graph is the next generation system of record that contains CMDB and core data in ServiceNow. Now, what I mean by this is, historically, CMDB as a data layer is targeted towards infrastructure and the core data. And core data is typically people and process related, which is entered manually most of the time. And the infrastructure data is something that you typically discover. So there has been a lot of focus on infrastructure and then tying it to the people and the process part of it. Now, as businesses accelerate their digital transformation efforts, they need a consistent data-driven approach to managing the entire digital lifecycle, including planning, deployment, business processes, and more. So we recently acquired a company called Swiggle, which focuses on configuration and pipeline data, which sort of what is depicted on the left-hand side of the graph. Following that acquisition, ServiceNow Service Graph now delivers this foundation. It's an evolution on top of our configuration management database, which is the CMDB. And it's going to underpin all of ServiceNow's products, enabling businesses for the first time, as a matter of fact, to bring together technology, people, and processes into a service-oriented view. CMDB, of course, will continue to remain an important part as an enabling technology to drive the service graph vision. Now, as you can imagine, there is a number of different silos that are bringing data, or if you think about different applications and different types of data that comes into the CMDB, they kind of look like this, where there is vendors that are bringing security-related data, there is infrastructure-related data, there is monitoring and IoT-related data that's coming in. And yes, bringing everything together does really help with the whole process, but it's a difficult problem. Primarily because from our customer itself, we've seen about 60% of the data that is coming from server and end user devices is coming from sources that are unknown. Unknown in the sense they're either homegrown or done by vendors that haven't really gone through a proper certification process. They've just implemented some custom solution. What happens as a result of this is that these integrations end up creating islands of data within the CMDB. Now, this custom integration may be done incorrectly. It fills up the data in the wrong places. It doesn't really map it to the right CI classes within the CMDB, often creating duplicate data that's actually polluting the CMDB. So the more this type of data comes in, the quality of the CMDB ends up being worse. And as a result, you hear all kinds of complaints from the customers and the end users that they are driving within their organization about quality of the data, the CMDB being unreliable, and in the end, CMDB ends up getting a bad rap. So the crux of the problem around the quality of the data and not getting what you're expecting to get out of CMDB has been around the quality of data that's coming in through these different sources. So what is the customer supposed to do? They end up having to deal with a lot of these problems manually themselves, meaning they are always reconciling this data across, like, oh, here is a piece of data that's coming from source X. Here is another data that's coming from Y. They do represent the same thing, but now I have duplicate records. How do I make sure that they point to the same thing in the same CI? And that reconciliation process is painstaking. So how do you solve this problem? So to solve exactly that, we introduced the notion of Service Graph Connector. Okay. So earlier this year, we started working with a number of partners in our ecosystem to develop what is now known as the Service Graph Connector program. Now, Service Graph Connectors are a plug-and-play method to bring third-party data correctly and quickly into the CMDB or the Service Graph. These connectors are available through the ServiceNow Store, and a number of them became available on September 16th through the ServiceNow Store. We'll go over the list of the ones that are released through the store on September 16th. Now, these connectors could be partner developed or developed by ServiceNow. The primary impetus for developing these connectors was to make it easy for customers to get data from third-party sources in a fast and a consistent manner. The benefits that you get out of this include a healthier CMDB, which we were just talking about earlier, with better data quality that can be leveraged across multiple outcomes, right? So it's not tied to a particular source. You can now leverage it across multiple outcomes. We also introduced facilities around handling multiple sources and being able to prioritize which source you want to consider as a higher priority compared to others, because let's face it, not all sources are built equal. They all bring data to some extent. They contribute to the same CI record, but they don't necessarily have the same weightage in terms of their importance. Right? So our partner connectors ensure that all third-party systems that businesses rely on today are directly integrated with ServiceNow. So Jamf obviously is one of our important partners, and that's why we are here talking about that integration, but there are others as well in the same vein. And our customers need to get enough value out of the CMDB by getting this data from tools that they rely on most in running their business, and they can leverage their CMDB investment. Now, we work closely with our partners, providing engineering oversight as they develop these integrations. Some of them are done by us as part of the initiation of the program itself. We just wanted to make sure that we go through this process ourselves before exposing it to our partners. So we went and developed some of the connectors ourselves. And now we have a toolkit, a nice model for how to go about building these connectors. And that's what we've been socializing with our partner ecosystem, and they've been driving this forward. So the value of Service Graph Connector is not only getting the data, but getting the data in a performance optimized manner. So this is one area that we focused on to make sure that even if the source itself is not very performant in terms of their APIs or the type of APIs and the data they return is not exactly performance driven, we've added technology on our side that allows us to deloop certain data, drop most of the traffic on the floor so that you're not periodically scanning same data over and over again. That's hardly changed or unchanged, as a matter of fact. The entire experience really comes with a guided setup where each of the Service Graph Connector has same type of experience as far as setting up is concerned. We're calling it guided setup, but the experience remains same regardless of which connector you're using, whether it's Jamf or SCCM or something else. There is also an operations dashboard that is available to track various different metrics like performance, like the errors, troubleshooting, making sure which classes are getting updated, getting the graphs around that. So all of that comes out of the box as part of the toolkit that we offer to our partners. And as a result, the customer experience remains quite uniform across different connectors, and that's a big plus. So quickly going over the flow for this. As you can see from left to right, the data flowing from the third-party data sources could be either pushed or pulled. And the pull is typically done through a periodic import, like a scheduled import that's an automatic job, or it could be pushed through an API straight into the data source. Now, the top box that you see is called the Integration Hub ETL. And that's a drag and drop UI-based tool to map all the incoming data into CMDB classes and various attributes. Now, this also provides a lot of out-of-the-box utilities to transform the data along the way as it flows through the system. So again, as a Service Graph Connector that is developed using these tools that are provided by us here, will allow each of the vendors to essentially have a very consistent way of dealing with this data. And from a customer point of view, again, very consistent way of seeing the treatment of the data come through. So if it is wrong, it's consistently wrong, but hopefully not. It will remain consistent. So if there are any changes, it applies across the board to all connectors. Now, once the mapping is configured, the rest of the flow is pretty automated, all the way down to the persistent layer into the CMDB. That part is all taken care of by the tooling itself.
In terms of use cases that we'll be addressing with this Jamf integration, it's really around the core technology operations of a company. So bringing visibility into the enterprise platform of choice, including hardware, software, and dealing with compliance in a platform that's built for the enterprise. In terms of ITSM, it's bringing efficiency and the data needed to streamline incident, problem, and change management, automatically assigning devices to users and tracking those in the ITSM platform. And then in terms of software asset management, tracking what's being distributed, what's installed, and what's being used with the idea of reclaiming software that's not used to minimize spend when it's not being used. In terms of data, for this initial release, the data being synced into the CMDB will include computers, disk, network adapters, printers, with mobile devices coming in a future release. In terms of software, we'll be bringing over software packages, installs, and application software usage.
So this slide captures the API interaction that goes on between ServiceNow and the Jamf Cloud. The underlying technology that we use to interact with external APIs is called Integration Hub. Integration Hub makes a call, gets the computer IDs, and then we go out and get details about each computer that brings in all the software and the usage data along with it. Now, over time, we'll be changing this. This ends up making a lot of API calls into the Jamf Cloud. Over time, there's a new API that allows batched requests and paginated responses from Jamf side that's being available. So that's part of the roadmap as far as the integration goes. This is the screenshot of the guided setup. As you can see, it's pretty clean. It has a handful of configuration steps, namely around supplying the credentials for Jamf Cloud, as well as pointing to the endpoint. And there is something called duplicate detection as well, which is a functionality that we offer on our side. Turning that on will allow you to drop a lot of duplicate data that is coming in from Jamf. If it is unchanged from the previous run, then it just gets dropped. And typically, we've seen with our customer who've gone through this experience, about 95 to 98% of the data is unchanged night after night when you do nightly imports. So it is a tremendous amount of performance gain in terms of not having to process this kind of data every night. This is the dashboard I was mentioning earlier. Again, this is the operations dashboard. Across the board, all of the Service Graph connectors get the same experience. It's a single dashboard, as a matter of fact, and there's a drop down to select any particular application that you want to drill down into. But overall, it shows an aggregate of everything. You have the ability to slice based on the times, based on the application, or based on any particular import that you might have run on a particular day. So a few options there to actually monitor the progress or troubleshoot after the fact. If there is a problem, or if the data didn't get resolved in the right CI classes, or if there is half data that's half cooked and it's been sidelined somewhere.
To drill in a little deeper in terms of reporting, any data that's been brought into the CMDB is available for reporting. Here we're showing the models of our fleet. So as you start looking at when to end of life machines and what the cost of that'll be, it becomes quite easy to drill in and see what needs to be purchased for the next year and what devices need to be retired, so you can really start planning and forecasting your hardware spend for the next year.
Great. So as far as roadmap goes, we have a few things. And Matt, you mentioned earlier about the mobile devices. So mobile device inventory discovery, iPhones and iPads and others in the family. Software usage tracking and license reclamation. These are primarily used for software asset management type use case, where you are looking at your software utilization, you're figuring out what is unused or lightly used, and then uninstalling that software and reclaiming this license. Now, this has a direct impact on the bottom line, and this does not just apply to the mobile device. It also applies across the board. Of course, applies to the computers and the MacBooks. So that is a very important use case. We are hoping to do this very quickly. We are the way the Store apps and the Service Graph connectors work is that each of these connectors will get released through the store, the ServiceNow Store, and there will be rapid cadence, monthly or even shorter than that, depending on how quickly we have new features that are available to offer. So it is not tied to a particular release family release of ServiceNow. As long as you are on Orlando patch 7 or on Paris patch 1, you're good to go, and it will be forward compatible going forward. So again, connectors are released through the store. They are compatible from Orlando onwards, and typically they will not be tied to any particular areas of the family release, but there may be certain situations. In that case, it will be called out for a given integration. Now, we're also looking at the API utilization, changing it to using Jamf Pro API, which is a more efficient way of querying. This is still work in progress. Jamf is still working on it. And as soon as we have availability of that, we'll start working on it ourselves, making that integration possible. So stay tuned for that one. As far as what got released on September 16th, here is the lineup that we have. The ones on the left-hand side are developed by ServiceNow, and the others on the right are done by the partners in our ecosystem using the same technique that I was describing earlier. So they all look and feel the same as far as the user experience goes. And as you can see, these are all market leaders in their own right in a certain industry vertical. We will continue to expand this list, both developing certain things ourselves, as well as adding more to the partners list as well. So more to come on that. This is just the beginning of the story there. Again, there are a few links here to ServiceNow Store, and these are essentially some of the components that we are open sourcing. Well, not open sourcing. They're available for free on the store, like Integrations Commons and Integration Hub ETL. Those tools could be leveraged if a customer wants to make modifications or write their own integration for that matter. So check out the store, search for Service Graph, and you will see a special section pop up with all Service Graph certified applications. They are specifically placed with a different moniker, and they are certified in a different way because they've gone through an additional layer of scrutiny in terms of the data validity, the quality, and how the data gets brought in and mapped to the CMDB. So again, there is a difference between applications that are sitting in the store just like that versus the Service Graph certified, the Service Graph connector certified applications, because they've gone through this extra care and feeding, involving our engineering participation as well with the partners, and they come with support as well. So they're fully supported by partners or by ServiceNow, depending on who developed those applications. Great. Matt, anything else to add here?
No, just want to say thank you. It's been quite a journey for Jamf and ServiceNow over the years, and we are thrilled to be announcing and seeing the launch of a first-party Jamf Pro integration in ServiceNow. And then I do want to plug the SaaS Ops session around using the Jamf Pro API to connect cloud systems and automate workflows, where we'll be talking about some of the enhancements coming to the Jamf Pro API to help with performance, security, and overall enable integrations. So Paul, thanks for joining. It's been a pleasure working with you and seeing this come to market. And thank you all for attending.
Yeah, my pleasure. I really appreciate your partnership through the months that we worked together on this. And again, thank you for the opportunity for allowing me to present here. And thank you everyone for tuning in as well.